This first story comes from John, a 28-year-old office worker in Portland. I work downtown in a pretty busy area, but I've always enjoyed taking my smoke breaks alone. There's this little wall outside our building where I like to sit and scroll through my phone. It's usually peaceful. It was around 2 p.m. on a Wednesday when I noticed him. I'd been sitting there for maybe 2 minutes, not really paying attention to anything around me. When I looked up, I froze. About 20 feet away, there was this guy just staring at me. He was wearing a long, dark coat that looked way too heavy for the weather, surgical gloves, and a white surgical mask that covered most of his face. But it was his posture that really unsettled me. He was hunched over, shoulders slumped in this unnatural way, like he was imitating something he'd seen in a horror movie. I tried to ignore him and went back to my phone, but I could feel his eyes burning into me. Every few seconds, I'd glance up, and he was still there, still staring, still in that same weird pose. He didn't move, and didn't blink. At least, not that I could see behind the mask. This went on for what felt like an eternity. But in reality, it was probably only a minute or two. Then I heard footsteps approaching. It was an older businessman walking down the sidewalk towards us. Perfect, I thought. Safety in numbers. But instead of feeling relief, something much worse happened. Without warning, the masked man moved. In one fluid motion, he crossed those 20 feet and sat down right next to me on the wall. Not a few feet away. Right next to me. So close, our shoulders were basically touching. My blood ran cold. This stranger, who'd been watching me like a predator, was now invading my personal space completely. I forced a polite smile. You know how it is. You don't want to be rude, even when every instinct is screaming at you to run. Can I have a cigarette? He asked, his voice slightly muffled by the mask. But there was something off about it. It was too calm and controlled. I handed him one, my hand shaking slightly, and he just held it. Didn't put it to his lips, didn't ask for a light, just held it between his gloved fingers and continued staring at me. Do you need a light? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He gave me a double thumbs up, this exaggerated, childish gesture that looked absolutely terrifying, coming from someone dressed like that. When I asked if that meant he had one, he did it again. I assumed he meant yes, and I turned back to look at my phone. Yes, I need one, he said suddenly. I handed him my lighter, and he lit the cigarette, but still didn't smoke it, just held it there, watching the smoke curl up between us. That's when I knew I had to get out of there. I stubbed out my cigarette and stood up to leave. This is when he started laughing. Not a chuckle or a polite laugh. This was full-blown, belly shaking laughter that echoed off the buildings around us. It was the kind of laugh you'd hear in a nightmare. I managed to say, "Have a nice day," and walked as calmly as I could back to my building, but I could hear him laughing the entire way. When I got to the elevator, I looked back through the glass doors, and he was gone. I never saw him again, but I changed my smoke break routine after that. Some encounters just aren't worth repeating. This next story comes from Sarah. and it happened when she was 6 years old in Madison, Wisconsin. It was back in 1973. What makes this story particularly disturbing is that Sarah actually had repressed most of these memories until her mother brought it up decades later. I was a really outgoing kid, the type who talked to anyone and made friends instantly. We lived in this nice middle-class neighborhood, and there was this huge park, just 3 houses down from where all the kids would play. Both of my parents worked, and when they'd go out for dinner or to the movies, they'd get babysitters from the neighborhood. One babysitter I really liked was this teenage girl named Vicky. She had lived a few blocks away and seemed really sweet. She played games with me, do my hair, and all the normal stuff that you'd expect. One afternoon, I was at the park with some friends. They wanted to play on the monkey bars, but I was more interested in the sandbox. When I looked over at the sand area, I saw Vicky standing there, smiling and waving at me. I told my friends I'd catch up with them later, and I ran over. We built sandcastles for a while, and then she asked if I wanted to go get something cold to drink. It was blazing hot that day, so of course I said yes. She took my hand, and we started walking towards the house. I have puppies at home, she said as we walked. Do you want to play with them? I was 6. The mention of puppies made me absolutely ecstatic. I couldn't wait to get to her house. But the moment we walked through the front door, something changed. I can't explain it exactly, but this cold, awful feeling washed all over me. My instincts were screaming that something was wrong, but I was too young to understand what that meant. I started crying, saying I wanted to go home, over and over. Vicky took me to the kitchen and got me a glass of water and some tissues in an attempt to calm me down. That's when I heard the dogs barking, but it wasn't the happy, playful barking that I'd expected. These dogs sounded vicious, and the sound was coming from downstairs. Next to the kitchen was an open stairway leading down to the basement. That's where I heard the barking coming from. Vicky started trying to convince me to go downstairs, telling me there were toys and games down there. Every fibre of my being was telling me not to go down there, but she grabbed my hand and started pulling me towards the stairs. The moment we started descending, I began screaming. The dogs were going absolutely insane, and I could see them in cages. They looked mean, really mean. Vicky completely snapped. "Shut the fuck up," she screamed, her sweet demeanour completely gone. "If you don't shut up, I'll throw you in the cage with the dogs, and they'll eat you." She was dragging me down the stairs while screaming this, and I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. Then just as suddenly as she snapped, she switched back to being sweet. "I was just playing a game," she said, her voice soft again. "Do you want to play hide and seek?" Somehow, she managed to calm me down enough that I stopped screaming. That's when we heard knocking at the front door. Vicky's eyes went wide. "Those are my friends," she said, forcing a smile. "They're here to help us play hide and seek." She convinced me to let her put a piece of masking tape over my mouth so I wouldn't make a sound during the game. And she lifted me into this large wooden storage box next to one of the dog kennels. She piled blankets on top of me and told me to be really, really quiet. I was terrified, sweating, and crying silently in that box while those dogs continued their vicious barking. I could hear voices upstairs, adult voices calling my name. That's when I realized we weren't playing a game anymore. When the officers finally opened the box and found me, with tape hanging off my mouth and tears streaming down my face, I grabbed onto one of them so tightly that my dad had to pry me off. What I didn't know at the time was that my mom had realised that I went missing and called the police. They'd organised a search party and tracked down Vicky based on witness descriptions. When they knocked on her door, she lied and said she hadn't seen me, but for some reason, she let them search the house. Vicky was convicted of kidnapping, and me and my family moved away shortly after. I never saw her again, but sometimes, now as an adult, I still have nightmares about that basement and those dogs. The final story comes from David. He experienced this just last year, outside of his hometown. My fiancée, Alexia, and I had just settled down for a quiet night. Pizza, movies, and just relaxing after a long week. We lived in this quiet residential area, right across from an old church, with a large cemetery behind it. It's usually peaceful, except for this one neighbour who has the loudest, most obnoxious dog you've ever heard. We were about an hour in their movie when the dog started going absolutely ballistic. This wasn't his usual annoying barking. This sounded vicious, almost panicked even. After about 5 minutes, I decided I had enough, and I went to talk to the neighbour. But when I got to the house, no one was home. The car was gone, and no one answered when I rang the bell. I figured I'd at least check on the dog. Maybe it was hurt, or something else was wrong. I walked around to their fenced backyard, and as soon as the dog saw me, it calmed down completely. Started panting and wagging its tail, like nothing had happened. I called its name, and sat down. Such a sweet animal when it wasn't barking its head off. That's when I heard it, footsteps crunching through the leaves somewhere behind me. I turned around. There was someone standing behind one of the gravestones in the cemetery, just watching me. At first, it was hard to make out the details in the darkness, but as my eyes adjusted, I could see this figure, just standing there, perfectly still, staring in my direction. The dog must have seen or sensed something, because it immediately started barking again. But this time it sounded different. Desperate. Warning. I looked back towards the house and saw Alexia standing by her car, probably wondering what was taking me so long. When I looked back at the cemetery, the figure stepped out from behind the gravestone. That's when I saw the blood. His forehead and cheek were covered in what looked like fresh blood, dripping down off his chin and in his hand. I'll never forget this. It was some kind of knife or dagger. The blade reflecting what little light there was. The dog went absolutely berserk, barking and throwing itself against the fence. The figure took steps towards us, and I could see more details. His clothes were dirty, torn, and he moved with this deliberate, predatory stride. Alexia called out, asking what was wrong. I yelled back for her to call the police, but I don't think she understood the urgency at first. Why, because of the dog? She called back. He's fucking armed. That got her attention. She ran inside to get her phone, while I kept my eyes on the figure. For what felt like forever. We just stared at each other, me, the barking dog, and this bloody stranger with a knife. Finally, he started to back away, moving toward the back of the cemetery, where it borders onto the woodland. By the time he disappeared into the tree line, I could hear sirens in the distance. The police searched the area, but of course they never found anyone. I could tell they were very skeptical of my story. Probably thought I'd imagined it, but I know what I saw. That night, Alexia and I locked every door and window in the house. We even called our neighbours to warn them. And you know what we did to try to calm our nerves after all that? We watched The Exorcist. Yeah, we don't make great decisions under pressure. Those were tonight's 3 true horror stories. Remember to always trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Lock your doors, stay aware of your surroundings, and never ignore the little voice in your head. Thanks for listening.